After the formal close, 7 p.m., the Zoom link will be open for another half hour for further unrecorded and unmoderated discussion in what we're calling the parking lot. So here are the 4 agreements that are traditional with courageous conversations that will make these conversations helpful to all of us. 1, stay engaged, don't zone out. 2, experience discomfort. It's all right to be uncomfortable. In fact, it's good because that's makes it a learning experience. 3, speak your truth. Say what you think personally. Try not to speak for other people, but speak for yourself. And 4, expect and accept non-closure. We won't solve the problem tonight, but we can make some steps toward it. We'd also like to acknowledge the people who have cared for this land for generations before the first settlers arrived. We're meeting, even if virtually, on the ancestral lands of Native nations in Wisconsin, including the Ojibwe, the Ho-Chunk, the Potawatomi, the Menominee, the Oneida, the Mohicans, and the Brothertown Indians. We acknowledge these indigenous communities who have stewarded this land through the generations, and we pay respect to their elders past and present, including you, Billy Bob. Now, I will turn it over to Amy Levy, who will moderate the meeting. Thanks, Amy.
Thank you, Neil. So thank you to everyone who has joined us. I know there's a lot going on in our city tonight with superintendent candidate forums, etc. So thank you so much for joining us. We are going to begin this evening remembering Dr. King and potentially some of the lesser known things about him. So the first clip that our group selected is actually from King in the Wilderness. I'm going to put the link in. The full almost 2-hour featured film is actually available for free on YouTube. So I'm sure there are some of us on the call that at another time are going to want to watch the complete film. So we will watch the first 30 minutes. And then we'll take a little bit of a break for reflections. And then we will watch the announcement of the Poor People's Campaign by Dr. King. So that's a short clip. And then we'll get some feedback. And then our final clip will be a presentation of the Poor People's Movement currently and some of the demands for equity that this group is making. So we will start with King in the Wilderness.
I came over in the morning to pick Martin up, to drive him to the airport to go to Memphis. The children saw him going to the airport all the time. But this day, the boys blocked the door and said, "Daddy, don't leave." And he said, "Oh, I'll be right back. I'm just going down to Memphis. I'll be back." Then they ran ahead of him and blocked the stairs and said, "Daddy, don't leave us." And he said, "Listen, I'm coming right back. I'm just going to go down there for March. You know, I explained why I'm going. These people have been mistreated in Memphis, and I'm going to do something about it. That's my work, and you know that." They ran over to my car, and then they jumped on the hood of the car, pleading again through the window, Daddy, please don't go. Daddy, please don't leave us. Daddy, please. Such pleading. We backed out of the driveway and got on the way. And he said, what in the world happened to these kids? They must be trying to tell me that they're missing me more. And when I come back, I've got to change my habits. I can't go through this.
I watched the transformation take place from the man that I met in the first instance to the man he became in the end. With all of his experience, he really was not quite ready for the human heart to reveal as much villainy. What he saw was more hate than he saw resolve.
We were trying to redeem the soul of America from the triple evils of racism, war, and poverty. And Martin had become far more exposed to enemies by taking on both civil rights and the war issue.
I couldn't imagine the pressure that was on him. Nobody could. None of us could imagine that. It was just too overwhelming.
The most difficult time of his life was the 18 months before his assassination. Very difficult time.
The closes of 1968, Martin Luther King.
He was disappointed, and he wondered whether or not he could do it anymore.
It had deeply that the nation had turned against him. And I always tell people he died of a broken heart.
I think he worried about dying before he had accomplished enough. It's as though that he knew that he was not going to be here for the rest of the struggle.
We've got some difficult days ahead.
The movement ceased to be political for him. It was spiritual.
But it really doesn't matter with me now.
He said, we have wandered in the wilderness of separate but equal, and we're about to move into the promised land of creative integration. And I don't know whether I'll get there, but my people will get to the promised land.
I'm 86. And you know, there's an African proverb that says if surviving lions don't tell their stories, the hunters will get all the credit.
I tell the story of Martin Luther King as I knew it. I lived it. I value all of what they gave me now that I can remember. I'm not just telling stories. I'm not making a speech. I'm telling you what happened.
Scene, Civil Rights, King, Van Oker, roll 20, sound 36.
Dr. King, this church is as good a place as any to go back over your commitment to the civil rights movement. When you went to Montgomery, Alabama and started the bus boycotts there, what was the philosophy of the civil rights movement as you saw it then, more than 10 years ago?
Well, I would say then the philosophy was that we must go all out to use legal and nonviolent methods to gain full citizenship rights for the Negro people of our country. And that particular struggle centered on breaking down all of the barriers of legal segregation. That period was a great period of hope for me. And I'm sure for many others, many of the Negroes who had about lost hope, saw a solid decade of progress in the South. And I think we are in a new era, a new phase of the struggle, where we have moved from a struggle for decency, which characterized our struggle for 10 or 12 years, to a struggle for genuine equality. Because there are three evils in our nation. It's not only racism, but economic exploitation of poverty would be one, and then militarism. And I think in a sense, and in a very real sense, these three are tied inextricably together, and we aren't going to get rid of one without getting rid of the other.
When you stood that August day in 1963 on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial, you said, "I had a dream." Did that dream envision a war in Asia and in the ghettos of the North?
No, I didn't envision that then. In 1963, to be in the March on Washington, it meant a great deal. It was a high moment, a great watershed moment. But I must confess that that dream that I had that day has at many points turned into a nightmare.
We were all caught off guard when these rebellions began. They started in Harlem and then Philadelphia in 1964, and then Watts in 1965, which was the most massive.
Martin called me early in the morning saying that there's a riot at Watts. We've got to go to Los Angeles.
Thank you very much, my dear friends of Los Angeles and the Watts area of this city. Now, I live approximately 2,500 miles from here. I'm not free there, and our brothers and sisters are not free there. And you are not free in California and in the North. I say it all over America, and I come out to Watts to tell you today, no matter what color you are somebody. And all over the United States of America, the Negro must join hands, and we must work.
Dr. King said that the ride became the language of the unheard.
You all know my philosophy. You all know that I believe firmly in nonviolence. Or maybe some of you don't quite agree with this.
Nonviolence is more than a tactic. It is one of those immutable principles that you cannot deviate from if you're going to be able to redeem the soul of America.
The issues in Watts and in the North were far more complex than black and white as they had been in the South. He was dealing with racism, but he was dealing with racism that was complicated by unemployment and unprepared migrants moving from the South to the North. And I realized we were in a different movement.
What we saw it as a lot of people who were suffering from the same kind of poverty, the same kind of absence of employment opportunities and police brutality were in the urban areas, and they responded with whatever weapons they could find.
The president during the riots was just depressed. About a week before, Johnson had signed the Voting Rights Act. Tells me this is the most important piece of legislation I'll pass, even more important than the '64 Civil Rights Act. He's virtually carried out of the room. on shoulders. And then we start the massive rioting in Watts. So he tells me, call Dr. King.
Hello? It's Dr. King. Yes, well, we're in a difficult situation here. How do you see it? Well, I tell you, Mr. President, I'm talking with the people in the Watts area. I'm fearful that if something isn't done to give a new sense of hope to people in that area, that a full-scale race war can be coming. I spent the biggest part of my life for the last 4 years on civil rights bills, but all of it comes to naught if you have a situation like war in the world or a situation in Los Angeles. Yeah.
All of this was happening about the same time that the war in Vietnam heated up. And the president was in the midst of a very heavy burden, both with war and domestically.
I want peace as much as you do, and more so, because I'm a fellow that had to wake up this morning with 50 Marines killed. But these folks, they all got the impression, too, that you're against me in Vietnam. I said that, Mr. President. I am concerned about peace.
Dr. King made the decision in '65 that he had to be against the war. We went to meet with Ambassador Goldberg at the United Nations, and Goldberg pretty much agreed with us that the war in Vietnam was not in anybody's interest. But the press said that he had no business having an opinion about foreign affairs. He was a civil rights leader, see? And it hurt him.
He said to me, he said, Vivian, you don't think I know what I'm talking about, do you? But he knew how he felt about the war. Also, I think Martin knew that he had to be a part of the North sooner or later.
One must understand that the civil rights legislation that we have had over the last few years, even the voting rights bill, which came the other day, didn't do too much to improve the lot of the thousands and millions of Negroes in teeming ghettos of the North.
I opposed SCLC moving north because we weren't finished in the South. We needed to continue political education, and we needed to work on building an economic base. Martin could sit there for an hour, listen to us argue about, no, let's go here, let's go there, let's teach this, let's do whatever. But he would teach a lot by asking questions. A sudden quiet would come over the room because he wanted to make people think about what they wanted. Martin could be very quiet and have all the power in the room.
Martin had decided that we had to prove that nonviolence was relevant in the North, that we had to find a way to get into these northern cities before the riots occurred. And so we went north to Chicago.
I do not know that everything that Martin said or did, he was quite prepared for. He had felt that in many ways, dealing with the South was a more predictable outcome because in the North, the racial hypocrisy was very subverted. It gave the appearance of being not like the South. The South was the center of all evil, and the North was a place of the higher experience. And Dr. King said, no, that's not the case.
We moved into an apartment on 16th and Hamlin. It was a walk-up apartment with no lights, no heat. And it took quite an adjustment. I never got scared in the South. I knew the dangers. And I was prepared to get killed in the South. But I wasn't ready to, to have a junkie stick a knife in me in the middle of the night, coming into that apartment for maybe $15 or $20 that I had in my pocket.
That first night was a very cold night, and I got really worried that there weren't going to be enough blankets. So we went and got the blankets and went over to see Dr. King in his apartment. And as we were sitting there, the doorbell rang, and there was a young man there. The first thing he said when he came in the door was, "Are you really Martin Luther King?" They had a very lovely conversation, with Dr. King really saying, "We want you to join the movement." And pretty soon later, there was another knock on the door, and there was like a whole train of them going down the stairs. And those young men came back a number of times to see Dr. King.
Yeah. People in the community, they would just hang around, wait for him to come downstairs, so they could see him. But he would invite them in, sit down and talk to people. They didn't think he was the kind of person they could talk to. Then it made them feel, well, honestly, that they were worthwhile as well.
Martin understood that if you ran with folk, you could organize folk. Remember, we've spent all of our lives being hated in one form or the other. But when we see somebody who really cares for people, period, right? That person is worth knowing.
The first week we moved in, the temperature dropped to about 16 degrees below zero. And people came to us to complain that they had no heat. And to find babies wrapped in newspaper, we had to start firing the furnaces. So we got all the money we could, and we got enough coal to get all of the furnaces to work. We called the movement in Chicago the Movement to End Slums. And it plunged us into several issues. One was the area of poor housing. The other was the area of quality education and also unemployment.
I feel like we know more about our problem than Dr. King because we live here.
What would you suggest that he do, Reverend Nixon?
I would suggest when it comes down to our city, he should get the hell out of here.
So first we ran into stiff black resistance. We'd never met that in Montgomery and Birmingham or Selma before. That was different.
A lot of the ministers were part of the patronage system. Mayor Daley's patronage system was one where people's jobs were handed out based on the number of votes that they could produce. They called it the Daley machine.
Martin had anxiety because, as he put it, we don't want to flunk. We don't want to fail in our projects.
We met regularly with Mayor Daley, and we disagreed because we were challenging the way Chicago was structured.
I think we're beginning to crystallize some of the problems and understand what we might do to begin to make some changes.
Does it mean demonstrations too, possibly?
Yes, it would mean demonstrations, but I think just when it would mean demonstrations, we wouldn't be able to say.
At the same time, we were still being pulled back to the South, and James Meredith decided to have a march in Mississippi.
When James Meredith, the Negro who desegregated the University of Mississippi, started the march, only 3 friends walked with him.
The purest way to power is through the vote. And for this reason, that I have decided to use all of my spare time trying to encourage Negroes to register and vote. And that is the purpose of this march today.
Mississippi wanted black folk to leave. They didn't want them to be there to vote. They were trying to starve them out. They were pushing people off the land, wanted them to go north. And the violence continued.
James Meredith's march was a march against fear. We had seen people in Mississippi getting killed for trying to register to vote because they didn't want them to have power. So he was trying to empower African Americans to not be fearful of all the threats.
If I can walk through Mississippi without harm, Meredith told reporters, other Negroes will see that they can too.
At that time, me and Stokely Carmichael were officers of SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. And someone came along and told us that James Meredith had been shot.
I'm hit in the leg and in the head. Ain't nobody gonna get me in the car. Here it comes right now.
The Meredith March wasn't on anybody's agenda. He didn't consult with anybody. But with the shooting of Meredith, Dr. King and civil rights leaders rallied around that.
This march that we are continuing, started by James Meredith, I am convinced will have as greater impact, or probably a greater impact, than the march from Selma to Montgomery.
If the youth today can still be shot down on the highways in Mississippi, peacefully walking, that march needs to be big. Thank you very much, gentlemen. No more questions.
Martin felt we could not ignore what was happening in Mississippi. So we had to divide what we were doing in Chicago. And so we had a Mississippi march and a Chicago movement.
From the moment that the civil rights leaders rushed in to continue James Meredith's march, there's been a struggle to see whose philosophy would guide the steps. The philosophical struggle deepened as the march column moved deeper into Mississippi. The voice of Stokely Carmichael, young leader of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, spoke louder and louder. At Greenwood, he sounded the march's new rallying call.
It's time we stand up and take over. We want black power. We want black power. We want black power. We want black power.
In SNCC, we saw a changing movement tactically. Our focus was on empowering communities.
We don't have to be ashamed of it.
Not only politically, but in terms of culture and identity.
What do you want? That's what we gonna get.
What they were basically saying is that black people needed to appreciate black. And it wasn't a color, it was a culture. And when I was growing up, to call a person of color black was considered derogatory. Those were fighting words. But there was a term that was used as well during that period, white power.
Stokely Carmichael gets control of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, and he purges the organization of all white people. He said, you go back and work in your community. We want to have total control. It rippled throughout the movement.
I will never forget Dr. King's face when Black Power first began to emerge. He looked like the most stricken man.
We must never forget, there are some white people in the United States just as determined to see us free as we are to be free ourselves.
We were taught that there were good people and bad people, and we never viewed this as black against white. We're taught that racism was a sickness, and you don't get mad with sick people. They just don't know any better. They've been taught that they are better than you.
What do you mean when you shout black power to these people back here?
I mean that they are oppressed because they are black, and their rallying cry must be black power, so that they can use that to ensure justice for themselves.
Martin's very uncomfortable, but he knows that he has to be there to support the courage of Stokely Carmichael without supporting the message or the form of the message. Dr. King was not opposed to power, but to elevate so-called black power over white power would break that which he was seeking to build, the coalition among white and black people.
I feel that while believing firmly that power is necessary, that it would be difficult for me to use the phrase black power, because of the connotative meaning that it has for many people and the feeling that this may represent a desire to rise from a position of disadvantage to one of advantage, thereby subverting justice. On the other hand,
some of the people on the march were intimidated by the whole effort of Black Power.
They must ask themselves why they are afraid of the word black and why they're afraid of the phrase Black Power. And
As long as we were talking about nonviolence and all that kind of thing, everybody felt comfortable.
Do you think you're really afraid of it or just feel that it's not a good thing?
Anytime when we talk about Black people having power, the assumption is that Black people want to be violent against white people.
Mr. Carmichael, are you as committed to the nonviolent approach as Dr. King is?
no, I'm not.
Why aren't you?
Well, I just don't see it as a way of life. I never have. I grew up in the slums of New York, and I learned there that the only way that one survived was to use his fist. I realized
When Stokely became chairman of SNCC, he had a different approach.
for me, it's always been a tactic and never a way of life.
He believed in self-defense.
Could you comment on that, Dr. King?
the Negro has an opportunity to inject morality into the veins of our civilization. And for this reason, I will continue to preach nonviolence. I will continue to...
Martin was an amazingly tolerant, understanding father figure for all of us. He understood Stokely's frustrations, and he never took it personal. I think Dr. King never forgot that we were all on the same side. He didn't have any enemies.
What I remember was the listening, the patience. He was always there to say, I don't go there, but I want to really understand why you go there. But that was the first real breach in the nonviolence commitment that many of us had grown to accept.
I'm sick and tired of violence. I'm tired of shooting. I'm tired of hate. I'm tired of selfishness. I'm tired of evil. I'm not going to use violence, no matter who says it.
I had not, before meeting Dr. King, ever taken the option of violence off the table. We are a minority living in the belly of the beast. When Dr. King stepped in, he methodically would look at violence and challenge those who would seek the gun as the solution. Because morally, you cannot defeat the enemy by becoming the enemy. But Stokely really believed that in the long run, the gun was going to have to be the answer.
And we begged the president. We begged the federal government. That's all we've been doing.
Accused Stokely of being just an angry, frustrated young man.
It's time we stand up and take over. Every courthouse in Mississippi ought to be burned down tomorrow to get rid of the dirt.
Anger eats away at your own soul, and it hurts you. Everybody has a right to be angry. Everybody has a right to be frustrated. But if you give in to your anger and your frustrations, you're going to lose.
Okay, so much there to discuss. I'm going to open up the conversation for anyone who would like to comment. And I haven't had the chat open while we were watching that clip. So as people get started, I will double check the chat. And I'm also going to put the link if anyone is interested in watching the rest of the clip. You can have access to that. So please go ahead and unmute yourself if you would like to comment. If you would like to send your question or comment privately, you can send that to me and I will share without including your name.
Well, this group is so quiet. I'm a newcomer and I didn't want to be the first to jump in, but somebody has to.
Please.
So I think the bit that had the most impact on me was, and I can't remember whose name he was, but the gentleman who described Martin Luther King as being very quiet, but that he would be quiet, but yet had the most power in the room. That is an underused power these days, I think. I don't have much more to say about that. I just really liked it. Good food for thought.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us. Welcome to this space, and hopefully you use that link to watch the rest of King in the Wilderness. Any other comments, questions for the group? Thoughts that you would like to share?
Steve Howland, I'll share something. I've always had a deep appreciation of Dr. King's work, message, life, everything. A large part of that, or a significant part of that, is the fact that we share the same birthday, January 15th. He was only 20 years older than I, which lets you know that actually he's been dead for a long time. He accomplished a heck of a lot in a short period of time. The other connection I had with Dr. King was one of his mentors and professors at Boston University, the School of Theology, where he got his doctorate degree. In his retirement, came and taught at the seminary that I went to for a year. So I had Walter Mueller, who was a mentor to King, and somebody knew him personally, be a bit of a mentor and teacher to me that I was impressed by. And one comment Mueller made at a Dr. King birthday memorial that was just getting started in 1974, people were starting to finally recognize and celebrate his birthday. There was discussion about King's tactics and his life and everything. And Mueller is somebody who knew him intimately and was, a great friend as well as teacher, made the comment, with Dr. Martin Luther King, nonviolence was not a tactic, it was a way of life. And that's always stuck with me, just how profoundly King embraced nonviolence, not as being a doormat, but as a way of life that enabled you to overcome the bitterness, the hate, the foolishness, the stupidity, all those other things of those who opposed him.
Steve, thank you so much for sharing that, and also bringing up Dr. King's birthday. Happy belated. My son's birthday is the 16th, so a great time of the year to be born. But one thing that I always like to do around Dr. King's birthday is to be grateful for and thankful to his wife, Sister Coretta Scott King, because without Sister King, there would be no MLK Jr. holiday. And imagine that she did all of that work and organizing to make that holiday happen as a single mother and while grieving the loss of her husband. So I am always remembering her as we celebrate him and her strength and her courage and what a dynamic team they were together. So Steve, thank you again for that. Are there other thoughts, comments, reflections as we remember Dr. King?
Hello, my name is Michael. I'm struck by the discomfort with the term of Black Power and how that's similar to the discomfort that I saw around Black Lives Matter when that first showed up, and then now around defund the police, that there's certain phrases that seem to inspire fear. And I think they explained in that piece, that, there's sort of this fear that if Black people have power, they will want to exact revenge. And so I think that still lives in our society.
Michael, thank you for sharing that. That is a powerful awareness and reflection. Thank you so much. It doesn't look like I'm seeing anything in the chat. If there are others that would like to share, just go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hello there. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. Whoever that
Thanks.
was. Go ahead.
Thank you. I'm Kara Hintz, and Michael, thank you for bringing that up because I was just thinking about the description of Black Power that we just heard about versus how it is portrayed in our current society is a vast difference. When you're talking about Black Power, like you just mentioned, it's too often maligned, and it's not too focused or not focused properly on the fact of simply giving people the ability to pursue whatever it is they need to in the United States, whether it's their vote, whether it's their job, whether it's their housing. And I really appreciate you bringing that up. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Karen. Shirley, did you have something to add?
Yes, thank you, Amy. I think it's often not discussed that Dr. King was talking about all people, not just Black people. He saw the commonality that there was a large group of people who were disenfranchised from the, I guess, the glory of the United States, of what we all dream of. And we often just concentrate on that dream. I wrote down a quote that he said, which really, really resonated with me, that the dream turned into a nightmare. And the fact that we are still today in 2021 addressing the same issues that he was having to address during his lifetime, which is my entire life. I was born in 1961, and my entire life we have been dealing with these struggles. I really heard his frustration, that little bit of clip where he said that he was sick and tired of violence and having to deal with people wanting to hurt other people, because that's not the issue. Some kind of way or another, we've got to come together and find decency and value all lives and all people. And something about that word Black, that was a theme that was in this clip as well. When we use the word Black, because it's Black Lives Matter, and people are taking offense. And we're still in that situation. And I'm looking for ways to connect with others so that we could start bringing some more harmony and not division. Thank you.
Thank you. Diane, did you want to share?
I did. I was the one that wrote that. I feel like we haven't come that far since then. I turned 18 4 days before Martin Luther King was killed. So that was my generation, and it was a bad time. It was a bad time, but I don't know if anybody has read Emmanuel Acho's Uncomfortable Conversations with the Black Man, but he does a good job of explaining Black Lives Matter in there. Just wanted to bring that up.
Thank you. Diane, if you have a moment, it may be helpful to some if you could just drop that in the chat. And actually, just let me take a moment for those of you that may be new to our group or new to Zoom. If you open your chat, so just hover on that bottom area of the Zoom meeting, and you should see an option that says chat, and it has like a little bubble there. Once your chat is open, in that bottom right corner, there are 3 white dots. If you click on that, your first option is to save the chat. Don't do it now because other people might be putting in resources, but before you get off the meeting, if you save your chat, it'll download to your computer. So all of the links and the resources that people are sharing in the comment, you'll be able to have access to that. So if there are no, yes, go ahead. Reverend Douglas.
Yes, thank you. So I actually had the opportunity to watch the full thing with my class. I'm in a doctoral program, and I took a ethics and theology class of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. In August, and many of us were surprised to hear about the pushback that Reverend King received in Chicago. And I'm curious if others were surprised about that pushback, or whether it was just us clergy folk who were kind of in the dark about that somehow.
Can you say that again, please, Reverend Colin?
Sure, yeah. So the pushback that Reverend King received in Chicago from other faith leaders, myself and other clergy members, when we watched this full thing, were fairly surprised about that, and I was curious if others were surprised about that, or if that was just something that people knew.
If I can comment on that, as someone who grew up in the Chicago area and lived in Chicago for 5 years, and perhaps being a bit older, was well aware of it. One of the churches that I served in near Marquette Park, southwest side of Chicago, was a spot where King was hit in the head with a brick during, I believe, the summer of '66. And the tension was just unbelievable. He made comments at times that he was never more fearful for his life than he was in Chicago. So yeah, the polarization there, even in the churches, and that, the Vietnam War, the Civil Rights Movement, boy, that was tearing churches apart in terms of those who, you're going too far, versus those that wanted to have the doors swung wide open. Yeah, it was big time. And Mayor Daley, the senior, the first Mayor Daley, who was prominent in that film clip, was, a real character in many ways, and did many good things for Chicago, and would portion a certain amount of jobs and wards and everything else like that for the Black population, but it was racist to the core. And you still see it reflected prominently in the Chicago Police Department and all the problems they have there. Yeah, it's just been an ongoing, long struggle.
Steve, thank you so much for that reply to the question that was proposed. Michael, I just wanted to check in with you. I saw your hand was raised and now it has gone away. Did you have something you wanted to add?
Yes, I also, I was born in 1955 and I lived in the Chicago suburbs from 65 on. My mother was, had her heart in and actions in all the right places in trying to help what we now call underserved and impoverished communities around us. But I clearly remember my mother, as a supporter of everything Dr. King was doing in the South. And when he came to Chicago to challenge segregation there, she said exactly that. He's gone too far. Just like many people said about his statements about the Vietnam War. It brought it too close to home and too close for comfort to be confronted with the fact that there might be racism in our backyard also. And I clearly remember those news stories when he was hit in the head with a brick and said he had never encountered the kind of hatred. I think it was in the suburb of Cicero, but it doesn't really matter. He'd never encountered that kind of hatred in the South. And I think what he meant, well, I think what happened was that it was so volatile and so outward. We see those almost cutesy kind of pictures of people waving their Confederate flags on the sidelines. Well, in Chicago, they screamed at them and threw bricks. And really none of that, I mean, I don't know, some things have changed, but so many things have not, because it's a very personally challenging thing when somebody says in your own neighborhood, home, close to me, that we still have racial issues. It's very difficult. So I just want to say, I too have a vivid personal memory of all those times. And I also remember my mother, this is just a parenthetical thing, watching her sitting in front of the television with actual tears at Dr. King's funeral. It was very striking to me as a young 10, 12-year-old to see these things. Left a lasting impression, as it should. But it's also so challenging to see that we still have so far to go. Dr. King made it to the mountaintop. All the rest of us are still struggling to get there. I just want to add one other thing. I appreciate taking the time here. We have all heard so much of his "I Have a Dream" speech. I never heard that clip where he said it has turned into a nightmare. And that's kind of sobering.
Thank you for your comments. So here, Renee, I see your hand and you are next. There are multiple screens. So if I do not, and then Tia, so we'll do Renee and then Tia. If you don't have your hand raised, but you'd like to comment or you don't know how to raise your hand, you can always put a question mark in the chat and then I'll also know to call on you. I just don't want to accidentally miss anyone while I'm toggling between screens. So Renee, and then we'll hear from Tia.
Okay, I was born in 1959. So at the time when Martin Luther King got killed, I was about 8 years old. You know, and kids learn what they hear. They learn what they hear. So I listened, you know, to my parents and my sisters and my brothers and my neighbors. And I learned a lot about Martin Luther King that way. And then I did my own research. But my whole problem is why does everybody gotta, let me make sure I phrase this correctly. Why does everyone have to be angry because we are all free to make our own decisions? How can you get mad at me because of a decision I made? If you don't agree with that decision, I understand that. But I think that's the problem with the world. You, in order to be in my circle, you have to think like I think. You have to do like I do. That's part of the problem. We are all individuals and we have a right to think what we want to think. And we have a right to our own opinions. And that's part of what the problem is. People are being attacked because of their opinion. If we could just get some order in everybody, let's agree to disagree. I think it will go better.
Renee, thank you for that. I think that what you are describing takes a level of maturity that is sometimes lacking and a level of security. Like it is not harmful for me if you disagree with me, you know, as long as your actions are not harmful towards me. So thank you so much for that. Tia, please jump in.
Talking about what Michael was saying about the proximity of racism. Well, it's not just proximity, it's also the the time. As recently as October, when I was walking along Riverside Drive here in Beloit, somebody yelled out the N-word to me from their vehicle. It's still going on today, right here in our beloved little town of Beloit. And it's so unfortunate that our beloved country that we all love has gotten to this point, and never in my 51 years did I ever think that we would be regressing. And that's exactly what's happening, is that we are regressing in this issue. Don't get me wrong, it's good and wonderful that we're all coming out and having conversations and trying to be productive in making things right. But the fact that people are allowed and it's accepted to be so vile and to have so much hatred in their heart towards another human being because of what? Because they disagree with Renee, or because they don't like the way I look, because I'm different. I'm at a loss for words.
Thank you, Tia. So I am going to pose a rhetorical question to the group, and then I am going to shift us into Dr. King's remarks as he announces the Poor People's Campaign. Thank you, Tia, for that. So my question is, which is rhetorical, I'm not looking for a response, but just give it some thought. Are we regressing or are we being revealed? And that is what I have been spending quite a lot of time thinking about. Yeah, are we regressing or are we being revealed? And what do we do about that? How do we feel about that? How do we process that? How do we help others process that? So
may I speak one quick statement?
Sure.
I'll make it quick, I promise. And that's the quintessential question, Amy, that I've been asking my friends that we've been talking about, and with my students at middle school. Like, have we really regressed, or have we just covered up so much? And we're so used to this fake, I call it with my kids, fake peace, because we press so much to have no conflict, you know, that we have at times, in my opinion, overstepped our reality, meaning that we have these issues that we refuse to deal with because it's hard and it's ugly, and our hypocrisy is real. And whether you look at Janesville or whether you look at the nation, there are so many things that we need to attend to on this issue of equality and recognizing another human being, like you were saying, Tia, recognizing that we're different. Great, we're different. Let's embrace that we're different, but let's find our commonality. We're human, so let's treat each other with humanity. And I've really been pushing that with kids and my friends, and I have a lot of people agree, but it's such a hard road because we've buried so many things for so long. Thank you.
Oh, thank you for that. All right, I am going to share my screen, and here we go.
Now, I want some of you all to go to Washington with us, even if you have to bring your whole family. We are going to have in Washington facilities, and we're going to have food, and we are going to demand that the government do something about these conditions. Now, we want y'all to come on to Washington when you get out of school.
With the Poor People's Campaign, Martin is talking about taking these poor people to Washington, build tents, and live on the mall until this country did something about poverty. Said, you know, we can do better than this.
We assemble here together today with common problems.
He started to look at the option of bringing all poor and suffering people together. And it's like, you know, sort of, doggone it, let's take on the whole system. Let's deal with the systemic poverty.
Thank you very much. We're rushing to get over to Alabama, and we've enjoyed being in Mississippi today.
Thanks for coming.
Many people will go into Washington by foot. We're going to have a mule train also coming out of the South. In 1776, the nation signed a huge promissory note. In this campaign, we are coming to get our check.
King was in fact talking about redistribution of wealth. He was talking about passing money down and shaking the system up. The Poor People's March on Washington was going to shake the government to its core.
Can you imagine what will happen if all these black and white and brown people will go to Washington and build tents and live in tents in Washington? You're talking about a redistribution of the wealth of this country? Oh, no. No, no, no. You're talking about new tax laws? Oh, no. Don't let King get to Washington.
All right, I'll also put that link. That is from American Experience on PBS, and it is season 22, episode 7. So I will include that. So what's coming?
I suggest that you go back to work.
Louder than me.
Sorry about that. The next clip started. So let's take a few moments and talk about Dr. King's announcement of the Poor People Campaign. So a few comments on that, if anyone would like to share, and then I will turn the floor over to Neil so he can introduce us to someone who is working locally on a chapter of the Poor People's Campaign. And then we will go into a clip with Dr. Reverend Barber and the Poor People's Campaign as it currently exists now. And the clip lays out the platform. So we do have time for a couple comments before I yield the floor to Neil. And I just put that second clip in the chat if anyone needs that link.
Thank you.
I
love that
really quick.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Renee.
I have a question really quick. I heard you say something about how we can save the chat. I didn't get all of that. And
if I don't go over it before we end this meeting at 7, you jump on and unmute and I'll walk you through it.
Okay, thanks.
No problem.
I really love that Martin Luther King Jr. was so aware. I know we know that about it, but when he uses all of these terminologies that create this rancor, that kind of shake people up because he was so avid, like so deliberate about the words he used, so intentional that you couldn't ignore him. You just couldn't. And I love that he goes right to the heart of the issue. He's like, you've given us a promissory note. I mean, can you imagine people who have heard from generation to generation about the Revolutionary War and then the Civil War and these promissory notes? I mean, he is going right for the jugular, but he does it in such a way with finesse and with acuity that he is calling people to action, not from just the people who are following him, but from his government. He expects his government to listen. And it's impressive how he just never let that go. He wanted the accountability, not from the people of the citizens, but also from his government.
Excellent point. And unfortunately, that is one of the very things that made him so dangerous and ultimately very endangered. Thank you.
Of course. Yeah.
That. So Neil, I am going to turn the floor over to you and you can introduce our guests and then we will follow up with our final clip.
Hi, I'm introducing Colin Douglas, who is, let me read it right. He's a member of the coordinating committee for the Wisconsin Poor People's Campaign, and he's chair of their moral outreach committee. And I know Colin because he happens to be pastor of First Christian Church here in Janesville, which is where I go to church. Thank you very much, Colin, for being here.
So Colin, if you have some updates or some frameworks that you would like to share with the group to kind of prep us for this final clip, that would be awesome.
Absolutely. So just a quick correction, my pronouns are they, them, theirs. not he, him, his. That's all. Pronouns are a different discussion. We can have another time, I'm sure. So the Poor People's Campaign in Wisconsin is broken into various special interest groups as well as regional organizations. The Rock County group has begun this last fall, or re-begun, as the state has gone through a couple of re-beginnings as well. But we have been organizing both in Beloit and Janesville through Zoom because, of course, COVID. We also have regional groups in Milwaukee, Madison, and there are some beginning groups in the Green Bay area. So that's all very exciting, or at least I find it exciting. So hopefully you can share in that excitement. We have a student outreach group, which has been able to get students involved from Beloit College as well as other universities across. We have the moral outreach, which is what we've rephrased the religious outreach or faith outreach to include those of no faith who are of moral conscience, not assuming that all people of religious conscience are moral. After all, one of the 5 sins that the Poor People's Campaign is devoted against is corrupts moral narrative. We also have labor outreach. One of the key things that Rock County has decided that we want to focus on is housing. We see housing as one of the biggest issues that deals directly with the interlocking systemic sins of systemic poverty and systemic racism. We've been doing a lot of public education and other various things. This last October, we had a Medicaid march, and coming up, we will be joining nationally with Reverend Barber for the Moral Mondays, as well as hoping, as long as COVID gets over, to have a national gathering of the Poor People's Campaign in Washington, D.C., which was dated for this last June in 2020, but of course had to be moved online, and hopefully we'll have our in-person gathering this year. Are there other, I'll stick around for more questions later, but if there are any questions now that I can answer, or was that too much?
No, that was perfect. Thank you. So I have 2 requests of you. The first is if there is a website or some link that we can go to post this conversation to get more information. If you could drop
Absolutely.
that in the chat for everyone to have that as a resource, that would be fantastic. And if it's okay with you, I think it'd be a really good segue if we go to the clip that explains some more information and the platform for the Poor People's Campaign. And then if you can stay around, so after that clip, if people have questions about how they can get engaged or mobilize around some of these issues, that would be fantastic if you could help field some of those questions.
Absolutely, I'd be happy to.
Okay, thank you so much. So before I share our final clip, I just want to remind everyone that this is a 3-organization partnership. YWCA Rock County and Diversity Action Team of Rock and Walworth counties are nonpartisan, and our friends Community Action Inc. of Rock and Walworth counties are actually apolitical. So I just wanted to be very clear about that. We are going to roll the final clip. Neil and Beth, is there anything that I missed with that disclaimer? All right, Neil is waving, giving me all good. All right, Beth, if I blundered that one, you get me straight in the chat, please. I am going to share my screen and we will move into our final clip.
Everybody has a right to live. Health care. Don't stop.
The Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival, has come up with a series of demands. And I want you to say those demands after I say them. I know that you are here for the same reason we all are here, to put our elected officials on notice. We demand an immediate restoration of the Voting Rights Act. We demand an end to racist gerrymandering. We demand a reversal of state laws that prevent municipalities from raising minimum wage. We demand a just immigration system. We demand a timely citizenship process that guarantees everyone the right to vote.
We demand an end to military aggression and warmongering. We demand a stop to privatization of military budget and any increase in military spending. We demand a ban on assault rifles and a ban on the easy access of firearms. We demand an end to federal programs that send military equipment into local and state communities. We demand that the call to build a wall at the U.S.-Mexico border be ceased.
We demand a ban on fracking, mountaintop removal, coal mining, coal ash ponds, and offshore drilling. We demand a ban on all new pipelines, refineries, and coal, oil, and gas export terminals.
We demand an immediate implementation of federal and state living wage laws. We demand the right for all workers to form and join unions. We demand equal pay for equal work. We demand a guaranteed annual income. We demand fully funded anti-poverty programs that protects the welfare of us all. We demand decent housing. We demand free tuition. We demand free tuition. We demand equity in education. We demand an end to the resegregation of schools. We demand equitable funding for historically Black colleges and universities. We demand relief from crushing household, student, and consumer debt. We demand the repeal of the 2017 federal tax law. And we demand that the wealthy and corporations pay their fair share. We believe that we can win. We believe that we can win. We believe that we can win. We believe that everybody has a right to live.
I want you to know that when hands that once picked cotton join hands of Latino, join hands of progressive white, join faith hands and labor hands and Asian hands and Native American hands and poor hands and wealthy hands with a conscience and gay hands and straight hands and trans hands and Christian hands and Jewish hands and Muslim hands and Hindu hands and Buddhist hands. When we all get together, we are an estimate of redemption. When we join hands, we can regard and make sure that the promise of life, liberty,
The teaching under the law is never taken away from anybody. So I got a question. All the rejected, ready to revive and declare that this land is your land. This land is my land. This land is our land. And together from the state house to the White House, the rejected are going to demand that this nation never give up on being one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So if you give me a minute, I will get that link. But are there questions? Are there comments? That was a lot to take in. What would you like to share?
Yeah, that was a lot to take in. And some of this stuff, somebody had mentioned earlier, we're still bitching about the same stuff from 40 years ago. We demand this and we demand that, and we haven't really made a lot of progress in some of that area. I don't know if some of you are aware that just in the last couple of days, our new president signed an executive order to stop the pipeline. And the boys and girls up in Minnesota were pretty happy about it. And so there's twinkles of hope out there. And I believe that the twinkle of hope, and I'm just sitting here looking at my screen and all you folks, it's because of you guys.
Well, thank you. I'd like to think so. We will all take that compliment, Billy Bob. Thank you for that. Other comments, concerns, questions? Yep, go right ahead, Reverend Douglas.
Yeah, I'd like to just point attention to the post that Michael just put into the chat, the 14 policy priorities. Please, if you have time, take some time with that, those policy priorities. And if you have just a little bit more time, please sign the petition to support the 14 policy priorities.
So let me do this because Renee made the request and I want to make sure while I have as many of you on as I can. So in that bottom right-hand corner, there is a square with 3 white dots in there. If you click on that square with the 3 white dots, you'll have like a list of items there. The first one should say Save Chat. And if you click on that, then everything that's in the Zoom link up until the point when you select that will be downloaded onto your computer and saved in a file. Now, the disclaimer is the file is going to look a little weird, but you can go in and copy and paste and put into a Word document and change it to whatever font, whatever size is most comfortable for your viewing. Are there questions about how to, because as always, there's lots of rich information in the chat. So I just want to make sure that everyone in the meeting has the opportunity, if they so choose, to save that information. So does anyone have any questions about how to save the chat? All right. So I will open the floor back up to comments, concerns. If you have a specific question for Reverend Douglas and the work that is being done in the local Poor People's Campaign, this is your opportunity to ask.
I'm sorry, but I don't see any 3 dots to save the chat.
Put your email in the chat. I'll save it and I'll email it to you.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
It seems like, in spite of the fact that all of those things are important, I can't help agreeing with Billy Bob that it is so much that it's almost hard to digest. And I don't know how, I mean, we each month, we try to focus our conversations here to learn. I just don't understand how the Poor People's Campaign can focus with so many demands.
So on a local level, I can answer that, and on a state level, I can answer that, and a little bit on a national level, I can answer that as well. So on a state and local level, we are encouraged to consider those priorities and consider the 5 interlocking sins of systemic racism, systemic poverty, ecological devastation, military economy, and the corrupt moral narrative of religious nationalism, and figure out on a local level what couple things we would like to focus on trying to affect what we feel is most pressing to our communities. On a state level, we also look at the whole state of Wisconsin and discuss what priorities we can reasonably handle and tackle. And then national also has views of things that are more pressing depending on what's going on at the time. All of these things are things that we want to accomplish and we're working on, but does that help explain sort of how that breaks down?
Reverend Colin, can you, maybe you can answer this question. What efforts are being made in Rock County, or are there monthly meetings about this? Or
yeah, so we are discussing. Right now we're in the building time and getting people together to talk about these issues and talk about where our efforts can be focused. And if you'd like to put your email in the chat, if anyone who would like to join the Rock County chapter's efforts would like to put their email in the chat, then I will put you into our email thread.
Okay, thank you so much. So we have time for a few more compliments, a few more comments, but if you have compliments, we will accept those as well. If you have comments, please share those, and then we'll take the last few minutes and indulge our host for the evening, and we will give our organizational updates and announcements. So any last comments, questions that you would like to have thought about, explored, possibly answered?
I just like to mention the link that I put in is the link to the national website, and that will give you information. However, national sends, if you register nationally for the campaign, national sends the states, and then state sends local groups all that information so that we can plug you right in. But please, if you have any other questions, I'm here for that.
Thank you. And Reverend Douglas, I don't want to speak for your time, but just to let everyone know, we do have the parking lot, which is the unrecorded, unmoderated extension of our conversation. And oftentimes guests that come to this format will use that time to organize, to collaborate, to continue to share resources. So just wanted to give everyone a reminder that that is coming up in 5 minutes, and that is an available space for you to share. So Neil and Beth, if you don't mind, I do have I think just actually 2 quick announcements. So I am going to pull up the graphic. All right, so I am sharing my screen. Okay, so this Thursday, the YWCA Rock County is hosting our winter lunch and learn. We are so excited to have Miss Sakara Wages. Sakara earned her undergraduate degree from UW-Platteville, and she has returned as an adjunct professor. She is also a fourth-year PhD student at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, the Sandra Rosenbaum School of Social Work. She will be sharing with us Subverting Oppressive Systems is a Superpower. This is free to attend, and I will drop the Zoom link in the chat. So I will stop sharing the graphic. I'll grab that Zoom link for you and put it in the chat. But I am so excited about our Thursday lunch and learn. So it is from 12 until 1 p.m. So if you are available, you will not regret attending this lunch and learn. My only other comment is that YWCA Rock County continues to work with Kids Forward on our Race to Equity report for Rock County, which will be featured at our 7th annual Racial Justice Conference, which is going to be held on November 4th of 2021. So of course, more details coming as we get closer to that date. But the reason I'm bringing it up is that lots of us represents lots of different organizations. So if your organization would like to have input on the Race to Equity report for Rock County, it's basically one question that is centered in race with 5 different areas. So we talk about health, juvenile justice, community impact, economic development. There's one more that I'm not thinking of right now. Oh, education. So if you are interested in that, please feel free to email me. I will put my email in the link and I will reach out to you so you can provide input for the report. So Neil or Beth, I will turn the floor over to you if you have any organizational announcements you'd like to share.
Yes, one more thing. Real quick.
Go ahead, Billy Bob.
I'm going to ask you because your co-host, Beth, all she'll do is make fun of me if I ask this question.
Absolutely. That's why I'm here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's one of the handicap. To say the chat box over here again is you hit the 3 buttons and where does it go? I hit save chat. Where does that go then?
It depends on how your computer is set up, but what I would do is most computers have a finder function. So if you're ever searching for a document and you're like, I remember a piece of the title, once you go to your finder function, you can put Zoom in that kind of search engine and it will pull up that report. It saves it as Zoom something. And then you're probably going to want to go in and change the font and the size.
My 8-track tape player won't do that. This will do. Yeah.
Okay, so I'll
email it to you.
What,
So
your
what I
8-track
did
tape?
in the chat is the link to register for Lunch and Learn. Neil or Beth, do you have any updates?
Yes. I want to remind people about the February program for Diversity Action Team. It is the 3rd Thursday, the 18th of February at 6:30 p.m. And the topic is coming out and moving forward. I don't have any more information about that, but the title is suggestive. So, so that's the announcement that I have, and remind you that the next Courageous Conversation is the 4th Monday of February, which is the 22nd.
Perfect. Beth.
At Community Action, we are all very excited to see that the BTC Soul Food Luncheon is happening this year because we are very food motivated at Community Action. So I believe it's the 23rd, perhaps, but it's on Facebook and also online. So please enjoy their carryout options.
It is February 23rd, and I can confirm that because I've already placed my orders. And I orders plural, and I am very excited to pick those up on February 23rd.
Right, it's a drive-through operation, so you don't have to, and you shouldn't even leave your car. You just sign up for 11, 11:30, 12, or 12:30, and whatever time you sign up for, you show up and pick up your food.
And one, I'll piggyback off of that, because I posted it, and then a couple people reached out to me, and then I felt like I was an ambassador for Black Hawk, which was great. So some people were asking, well, if I'm not going to be able to pick up my food, can I just donate? And I can confirm that final option, if you go like you're going to pay for a meal or meals, you can donate in any amount you would like. Or the other thing you can do is you can purchase meals for other people and just put their name in as the authorized person to pick up. So I know a couple people who are taking advantage of that. So if you have someone you want to purchase a meal for, put them in as the authorized person to pick it up, and you can go ahead and pay for it and take care of it. All right, we have taken you a minute past, so thank you for allowing us to indulge in our announcements. This ends our official recording for Courageous Conversations, but parking lot is open and feel free to stay and connect.
And I did schedule time to be here till 7:30, so I can stick around if people have more questions.